office. Mueller pushed for Gates, this was a guy, the campaign deputy director for a while, help on collusion. Then it's picked up by other news sources. Mueller, that's the special counsel, pushed for Gates, that's Rick Gates, who's under indictment, for help on collusion. Then there's this headline from CNN. Reuters, Mueller probes contacts at GOP convention. Mueller probes contacts at GOP convention. Now, why did these two headlines grab my attention? Because, folks, number one, Mueller is investigating Republicans, and only Republicans in the Republican Party, the RNC, the Republican Convention, the Republican presidential campaign, Republican spokesmen, Republican lawyers, and a Republican candidate. He has absolutely no interest whatsoever. If we're to believe these media reports, he has no interest whatsoever in investigating the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC and the role in the dossier, which links them to the Russians. He's no interest whatsoever in the abuse of power by people who used to work for him. FBI agent Stroke, FBI agent Page. He has absolutely no interest in what Jim Comey knew. In fact, he's using Jim Comey to help support his prosecution. No interest in the FISA abuses, let alone Uranium One or any of that, given his own involvement in Uranium One and the involvement of the Deputy Attorney General, quite frankly. So let us be crystal clear about this so the backbenchers tomorrow can understand this, and the liberal media, which already know it. Robert Mueller is not there to get to the bottom of Russian collusion. He's not there to get to the bottom of Russian interference in the election. Those are things he will use to justify his actions. But the special counsel is investigating the Republican Party, the Republican Convention, the Republican candidate, all things Republican. That's what he's doing. And he's being given permission to do it in some ways that are utterly unconstitutional by the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Rod Rosenstein, who has a Republican affiliation. But that's just ministerial. He doesn't really give a crap. He's been a bureaucrat his entire life. He's been on the public payroll his entire life. And so that's what we have going on here now. Now, as to this other story, Mueller pushed for Gates. Let me read some of this to you. Special counsel Robert Mueller's team last year made clear it wanted former Trump campaign deputy Rick Gates' help, not so much against his former business partner Paul Manafort, but with its central mission investigating the Trump campaign's contact with the Russians. Now keep that in mind. Not Hillary's contact with the Russians, not the DNC's contact, not their surrogates' contacts, no. New information disclosed in court filings and to CNN this week begin to show how they're getting it. Now, Mr. Attorney General of the United States, I've known you for over 3 decades. You should be asking for a criminal investigation here. New information disclosed in court filings and to CNN. So we know these are leaks out of Mueller's operation. Begin to show how they're getting it. In a court filing earlier this week, the public saw the first signs of how the Mueller team plans to use information from Gates to tie Manafort, the former campaign chairman, directly to a Russian intelligence agency. Mueller's team alleges that Gates was in contact with a close colleague of Manafort's who worked for a Russian intelligence agency, and that Gates knew of the spy service ties in September and October 2016 while he worked on the Trump campaign. Gates would have to talk about the communication with the man if prosecutors wanted, according to the plea deal. This is it? This is collusion? This is the Trump campaign colluding with the Russians? That's in line with... Now let me tell you why this is being leaked by the Mueller team. They're trying to create the narrative for when charges are brought. They're trying to create the narrative. So they're planting the stories in friendly media outlets, and there's no friendlier outlet than CNN. Goes on, that's in line with what prosecutors told Gates months ago during high-stake negotiations, CNN has learned. Well, how would they have learned that but for the fact that prosecutors, again, are leaking to CNN? They told him they didn't need his cooperation against Manafort, according to a person familiar with the investigation, and instead wanted to hear what he knew about contact between the Trump campaign and the Russians. The extent of Gates' knowledge about any such contact or what he told prosecutors hasn't been made public. But as part of Gates' agreement to cooperate with the special counsel a month ago, he earned a vastly reduced potential sentence and had several charges dropped in 2 criminal cases against him. Gates' plea also adds to mounting pressure on his co-defendant Manafort, who so far the government is making a central player in the investigation, to change his plea and potentially help investigators. And under his plea agreement, Gates still could be called to testify against Manafort. All right, this is all dirty pool. These are all interesting KGB tactics being used by Mueller, not to get to the truth, but to destroy people to get what he wants. But the point here, ladies and gentlemen, is that Mr. Mueller is investigating the Republican Party, and Mr. Mueller is trying to, cobble together this collusion stuff. Look at this. Gates knew of the spy service ties in September and October 2016, and he still spoke to the guy. Oh, my God! Well, luckily, Mr. Mueller wasn't the special counsel when John Kennedy was president of the United States, because John Kennedy had an affair with an East German spy. Oh, yes. CNN won't report that, even though it's fact, and I don't even need to leak it to CNN. There it is, it's a fact. And, of course, Ted Kennedy, the infamous Ted Kennedy, Chappaquiddick, that movie I intend to go to, the infamous Ted Kennedy had incredible contacts with Russian spies, even the Russian government at the highest levels, just over 30 years ago, to try and influence the election. Luckily, Mr. Mueller wasn't around then. The Democrats have defended Alger Hiss. Oh, yeah, they attacked Whittaker Chambers, who fingered Alger Hiss. They attacked Richard Nixon, who also did. His un-American House Committee. Un-American investigations of people who were un-Americans, not him. And that's why they wanted to take Nixon out from day one. That's why they trashed Whittaker Chambers all the time. Alger Hiss was a big leftist. He was an advisor to Roosevelt. He was involved in splitting up the world after World War II. And he was a communist. He was a spy for the Russians. You should Google this and see how they defended him. But now, finally, we found our guy, Gates. Gates spoke to a guy who he had to know at one point was a Russian spy. What did they discuss? I don't know. That hasn't been leaked to CNN yet. CNN gets more information about what's going on than any congressional committee because it's being leaked by Mr. Mueller's office. Now, I told you the leaks a year ago or so were coming from the highest levels of the FBI. And it turns out they were. How did I know that? Because I remembered Watergate. That's where they came from. These guys are in a position to have all this information in order to leak it. The senior levels of the FBI. Now, how do I know this is coming from the prosecutor's office? Because CNN is doing a very rotten job of covering their tracks. Not only are they essentially revealing this, but the information they have has to come from Mueller's office. And nobody cares except me and you. So CNN is aiding and abetting this. This is why CNN and the other members of the Praetorian Guard are going to protect Comey, because he was a leaker for them. McCabe, they're going to protect him. They're not outraged by Stroke, leaker, Page. They're protecting their sources. The Praetorian Guard. Moreover, they like what their sources have to say about Donald Trump and the Republicans. Because the media is an appendage of the Democrat Party, and the Democrat Party and the government in many respects are one and the same thing, as I keep explaining. So Mr. Mueller now is investigating the Republican Party. That's basically it. He will not even tip his toe into the Democrat Party's pool. He hasn't asked to interview Hillary Clinton. He hasn't asked to interview Susan Wasserman Schultz or Donna Brazile over there at the DNC. He hasn't asked for any of them to come before his federal grand jury, but he's throwing a very, very wide net, a preposterously wide net when it comes to Republicans.